Jim Kaat, former Yankees pitcher and broadcaster with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports. Jim's brand new book is out, If These Walls Could Talk, the New York Yankees. Jim, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and we love the new book. What inspired you to write this book that chronicles so many great and legendary Yankee stories?
Well, the first book I did called Still Pitching with Triumph Books, the publisher, Tom Bast, said, I'd like to start doing a book now with different announcers who have followed teams for, a length of time. And Mario Impemba, for example, did one in Detroit on the Tigers. And, of course, I was fortunate to cover the Yankees during, as successful an era as they've had in some time, from 1995 to 2007. So that's where we got the idea.
Now, you've worked with some of the other bigger voices. Like I always remember you and Phil Rizzuto being one of my favorite teams to listen to. You talked about the game.
Well, Scooter, I learned a lot from Bill White in a positive way, and I learned a lot from Scooter on how to stay on my toes because you never knew what he would do, and it is in the book. But in 1986, I was doing the Yankee games on PIX, WPIX, and we had a three-man rotation, so obviously one of us was always off. In the last three innings of this cold night game in Cleveland, Scooter and I were the two covering the last three innings. And as I got into my chair, Scooter said, "I'll be right back, Kaat. I got to go to the men's room." And, of course, the minutes went by and the innings started. I'd never done play-by-play in my life. And so the innings started. I said, well, I guess I have to, here's Joe Carter or whatever it was, started describing the action. And the producer said, where's Rizzuto, on our talkback that you guys know we have. And I said, well, he went to the men's room, said he'd be right back. He's not coming back. And he didn't. I did the last three innings by myself. And next day he saw me and said, yeah, it was too cold. I had to get out of there. So that's what working with Scooter kept you on your toes. But it was very educational working with Bill and Scooter for that 1 year.
But with Scooter, he's just one of those guys you can't even get mad at him, right? He's just that guy.
Yeah, he's like there are guys like that are icons in their markets that have been there forever, like Richie Ashburn in Philadelphia and Uke in Milwaukee. And, of course, on a different level, Scully is so revered out in L.A. Scully would never go out of the box like Scooter would. But, yeah, you just, you learn to accept those guys. The fans love them. They love them because of their foibles as well as their great success that they had on the field and their popularity in the booth.
Jim Kaat, author of his newest book, If These Walls Could Talk, the New York Yankees, available now. Of course, former Yankee pitcher as well and former Yankee broadcaster. Jim, as you look at the New York Yankees as they've developed over the decades, how have you seen this team evolve from ownership to where they are currently, both on the field and in the front office?
Well, I think of course, I go back to my first game, and fortunately my first win against them was in 1960, and that's when, they had those great players year after year. They all stuck together. It was, Whitey and Mantle and Maris and Skowron and Yogi and Bobby Richardson, on and on. Fans then got to see basically the same team every year. Then they went through a dry spell in the late 60s. Then when free agency came along, they hit a home run when they got Catfish and then later Reggie. Then they hit another dry spell, and I think that's when George, I think, decided to sort of turn some of the baseball responsibility over to Gene Michael and got out of the way a little bit in terms of baseball decisions, and then Stick, starting in the early 90s, really built that great team, and Bob Watson and then Brian Cashman got involved there as well. And, they made some trades in the late 90s that turned out to be terrific, and free agent signings like El Duque, Mariano. They didn't know how good those guys were going to be, so everything really came together for them. Then I think in the early 2000s, they went backwards. They started signing these high-priced free agents that were sort of past their prime. Good guys, but not the productive players that the Andy Pettits and the Tino Martinez were. And now they're just kind of, they may win the division, but they're just sort of plodding along, and nobody in that division seems to be very good. So you could probably win it with 86, 87 wins.
Jim Kaat, your book, it's a quick read. If you're a Yankee fan, it's a fun read. If These Walls Could Talk. We have Jim Leyritz on the show every Tuesday, and he compares this team to the 95 team. He says he sees some younger talent, in the minors who could step up and become like the producers like you're talking about in the 96 and on. When you look at this team, do you see any comparison to that 95 team?
Well, I'd have to take some time to think about that. I mean, I remember when Andy Pettitte came up then. I don't know if they had the same mix of veterans. I guess they had, Jimmy Key. I guess Jim would know better than I would in comparing that team. I had never thought of the 95 team as this team. I always, coming off that great year that they had, but unfortunately the strike shortened at 94, I sort of thought of the Yankees as a very good team then. And this year's team is turning out to be a first-place team, but I don't think you can call it a championship caliber team. I mean, they get a few games over 500. So this team, to me, is much more unpredictable. You have the young pitchers like Warren. You got guys coming out of the bullpen now. Shreve, they've done a really nice job. Call up Mason Williams. He has a couple of good games. So I don't think they're as solid and predictable as the teams in the mid-'90s and then into the late '90s, but they're on top of the division.
Former Yankee player and broadcaster Jim Kaat with Armen and Levack, his latest book, If These Walls Could Talk, the New York Yankees. Jim, is it bad that the Yankees don't have a face for the first time in several decades? They don't have a Derek Jeter. They don't have that face that we recognize and correlate directly with the team?
I don't know if that's a bad thing. I mean, it's a fact. Yeah, I remember when Whitey Herzog took over the Cardinals, and they said, who's going to be your leader? And he said, I'll be the leader. So Whitey was sort of the face of our team. We got known for Whitey Ball, like the Yankees did for Billy Ball. Joe Girardi, doesn't have that kind of personality. Joe is a very stable, clear-thinking guy, Northwestern guy, and he's not going to try to take the spotlight away from his players. So I think the only thing that will happen as far as a face of the Yankees is if some young player comes along and develops into a Derek Jeter. For most of the years, the Yankees' success, it wasn't built around one guy. I mean, they had Mickey, the Triple Crown winner, and then Maris at 61, but even in 77 and 78, they had a cast of characters, and they did the same thing from 96 through the early 2000s. They didn't have any league leaders, MVP type players. They just had outstanding baseball players like Brocious and Knobloch and Paul O'Neill and Tino and Bernie, and when Joe was still catching, they just had solid baseball players.
Jim, as I read the book, I loved hearing you tell the Scooter story. It's fun for me to get that kind of baseball knowledge, to hear you tell the story. Is there another story in If These Walls Could Talk that people just should hear from your voice?
Well, I think they're not all positive, but none of them were really. It wasn't a real anger situation. But when Alex, during his first year, if you remember, Alex Rodriguez had a lot of trouble handling the high fastball. And late innings, his average in his production was just non-existent. And so every day I would come to the park, and especially that was his first year. So I said to him, do you prefer Alex or A-Rod? He didn't care. We had a nice relationship. Every morning when I got to the stadium, or rather every afternoon, I'd usually go around the batting cage, hi Bernie, hi Paul, hi Alex, whoever was there. And the night before, we had done a side-by-side on TV. We showed Derek Jeter's swing, and we showed Alex's swing. And Derek had that nice compact swing. He was hitting the ball to the opposite field. He was very productive late in the game. Alex was not. And I said, here's the issue. He's got too long of a swing. And I talked to Don Mattingly, and Donnie said, I don't want to mess with him too much. Donnie was a hitting coach then because he's been such a great player. Well, the next day I saw Alex, and I said, "Hi, Alex," and he kind of turned a cold shoulder to me. So this went on, and we didn't have much of a relationship at the end of the year, but the next spring he asked Rick Cerrone, the PR guy, that he wanted to see me, and he said, "Look, I had a lot on my plate last year, and let's start over, fresh start." I said, "Look, Alex, you know, I'm not your PR guy. I work for the viewer, and in a perfect world, if you hit 60 home runs, knocked in 200, make my job easy, but I have to tell the viewers what I see." And so, you know, those were just some of the little things that go on behind the scenes, but it wasn't, you know, we have a good relationship today, but that's just some of the things that go on that maybe the fans don't get a chance to hear or see.
That's fascinating. His newest book, If These Walls Could Talk, New York Yankees, Stories from the Yankees Dugout, Locker Room, and Press Box, now available, written by former Yankee broadcaster and player Jim Kaat. Jim, how has A-Rod changed over the last 10 years from those days to now when you see A-Rod play baseball?
Well, I think the big difference, I've done a couple Yankee games, and, you know, when he got to New York, I think his mission was he was going to take over the city and be bigger than Derek. And I think he had that, and he paid attention to what everybody said about him. He was so image conscious, and it just backfired on him. You know, no matter what he said or where he was, whether he was out in Central Park with his shirt off, taking in some rays that made page 6, and it just became disastrous for him. And the more he tried to sort of promote himself and come off as a really good guy, it came off as just the opposite. Well, now that he's been through what he's been through, what I see in him, and I think the reason he is more productive, is he is a lot more grateful for the opportunity that he has in baseball. He's a lot more humble about his status in the game. And when you read all of his quotes, these are the things that if he had said those back when he first joined the Yankees, he would be maybe close to as an iconic figure as Derek. I mean, I don't think he'll ever reach that status, but I think for the most part, people are happy to see that he has turned it around, and I think his attitude is a big part of that.
Jim, when you look at this year compared to that dynasty era, how much does it hurt baseball that the Red Sox and the Yankees rivalry just doesn't seem as strong or as passionate?
Well, I think it hurts the TV ratings. I think if we up here, I say we in the Northeast because you're in Albany, I'm up a little above you in Vermont, and there's kind of a combination of Yankee, Red Sox, and people in the Northeast tend to think that the whole game of baseball revolves around the Yankees and the Red Sox because it did for several years. But I think in general, the national baseball fan appreciates the fact that Kansas City is now becoming a good team. The Twins are getting a lot of attention. Houston, there's a lot of different teams. Now, that's not going to translate into big TV ratings because those go down every year in the World Series. But it's just, I think, the drafting, the central fund where the small market teams get a chance to get some of the tax money that the wealthier teams that in some cases have just wasted their money by not making good decisions. It's allowed them to buy, some good young players and put a championship team together. So I don't know that it has hurt baseball, but it certainly put a downer on the avid fans here in the Northeast.
Jim Kaat, If These Walls Could Talk, New York Yankees, did a lot of work interviewing a former and current New York Yankees and management and giving you an idea of how this franchise has evolved over the last several decades, going way back to the beginning of the Yankees. Jim, thank you so much for your time today. We are your home for New York Yankees baseball. So as you said, you're in Vermont. If you ever make it our way into Albany, let us know. We'd love to have you stop by.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you having me.